year and a half. I wanted a teacher that cared until I got you in
I
there
know.
because I don't want to
You got too much of a teacher that cared, huh?
Exactly.
You're the character that can't pick if he wants to be good or bad.
That's it. I can't decide if I want to be good or bad. It's not that y'all can't decide if I am good or bad.
It's like over the Thanksgiving break, right? I got super excited. I was like, oh my God, Mr. Kinney has had a come to Jesus meeting and he did not give me homework. And then over the weekend, I was like, oh man, Jesus telling him not to give me homework. And then what did you do? You gave me homework.
I didn't make you do homework over Thanksgiving break. I thought that was very nice and generous.
Oh, that was very good.
Yeah.
I was very surprised when you said that.
Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, spring break. Those are your 3 times without homework.
When did you do that last
Every other
year?
night. Every other night.
Every other night.
I'm dead.
Last year I don't think I did, but you know. Well, actually, y'all wouldn't remember spring break because we never came back after spring break.
Yeah, but you
What did you
said
do
that
that Friday? Because I wasn't there that Friday. And then it got canceled and then made me so angry.
Okay. Oh yeah, because you had the fishing tournament, is that what you said? Yeah. 3 and 4. What, first off, Corell, what were you going to say about 3 and 4? How could you approach it?
If I remember correctly from what you was telling me, is that from Y, the top part, because it's 2 different parts of it, right?
Yep.
So for the top part of the Y, and it's 2 on the bottom for C.
Okay, so
Makes sense.
the y has to equal.
2. It was 2.
Now notice, C's not the only answer with y equals 2 though.
Yeah, I know, but I'm not done, Miss King. Finish.
Okay.
So I plugged in negative 2 for. I multiplied negative 2 times 4x. I think. See, I ain't got one word for it. It's kind of hard for me to get a word for it, but I'm trying to remember.
This is why you're supposed to
I'm
have.
trying to remember. But I think I did that. I'm not sure.
Well, let me remind you this. So first off, we know the y has to be 2, right?
Yeah.
Does that eliminate any of the answers?
Yes.
Which one?
B.
Okay. Now, what you need to remember, Corell, is this 2 is the y value. What is the negative 2?
The x value.
So it's not that you're multiplying negative 2 times negative 4x. You're plugging negative 2 in for
X.
right. And then if I plug negative 2 in for x and 2 in for y, 2 equals negative 4 times negative 2 minus 6. So that gives me 8 minus 6.
Hey, Mr. King.
Is that true?
Hmm?
Is that true?
Yeah, it was 2.
So that point makes the bottom equation true. Does that point make the top equation true?
Yes. That's what it was.
Remember, the solution to an equation is the value that makes the equation
True.
true.
But when I look at this again, I don't understand how we got number 4 now.
Well, I mean, first off, I will point out the solution is the value that makes an equation true. But how many equations do we have here? 2, and notice how we have 2 variables. And there's 2 values here for each point. So this point made both equations true. So this point should make both equations
True.
So you can quickly check that. Does negative 2 equal 2 times negative 3 plus 4? If you do the work, it does. Negative 3 plus negative 2 is equal to negative 5. Also true. Now I'm going to talk about the work I chose for it because it is different. Now that is very straightforward, very simple, but I'm going to talk about the reason I did the way I did it. But first, Peyton, you had a question.
Did you tell us to do the whole vocab? Because I asked one of my friends over the weekend because I forgot, and he said do the whole thing.
First 2 words.
And the first 2 columns.
I'm done.
It was the first 2 columns of the first 2 words.
Oh, okay.
You did the whole thing?
That's great. Yeah.
If you have the whole thing when you show up tomorrow, I might not count it against you for turning in the link.
Yeah.
But also, we haven't even done all those words.
Yeah, I had to Google it.
We only did the first 4
I
words.
Googled it.
And that's why I only assigned the first 2.
I Googled it.
Yep. Nope.
It was not a good time.
Remember, the first column says personal definition from working through the task. Actually, that's the second column.
I just Googled it.
But that's not what I want you to do. These should be summaries of what we have been learning. Like, that's the reason why I have the vocab graphic organizer set the way I do, is because I don't want you to Google the answers. I want you to go back to the task and think through, okay, what have I learned about this word based on this task?
Mm-hmm.
The thinking and the reflecting on what you've done, that's the most important part. Okay, but Corell, what I would point out to you, or what I would tell all of you, and the reason I set this problem, or I word these problems out the way I did, is it's really easy when you're given points to plug those points in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I didn't give you these points,
It kind of hard.
It'd be kind of hard, right?
Yeah.
But it's not terrible. Y is equal to 2. So what could that 2 take the place of?
Wow.
So 2, that y value is 2, equals negative 4x minus 6. What can you now do?
Subtract
Subtract what?
6 or 4. Subtract 6.
When I look at this equation, I'm already subtracting 6.
Oh, add 6.
So add 6. Then what do you do after that?
Then add to the other side, which it will be 2x.
2 plus 6 is
8.
8. Notice 8 is equal to negative 4x. So then what do you do?
Divide.
By?
It's starting board, but
Yeah, what is it?
negative 4.
There you go. Do it on both sides, and so I get x equals negative 2. Notice that is the solution, but what is this process you just went through?
It's 30.
It's another S word, right? The process that allows us to find the solution is called,
Solving.
thank you. Wouldn't that make sense?
Yeah.
The thing that allows me to find the solution is called solving. Desiree, make sure your mask is up over your nose, please. So we solved this equation. And we already knew that y was 2. Now x is negative 2, so there's my point. Make sense?
Yeah.
But look at this equation, right? Or this system. By the way, why do you think we call it a system of equations? Why isn't it just called an equation? Why is it a system of equations?
Can you solve for x and y?
Okay, that's part of it, why it's a system. How many equations are there?
2.
So is that more than one, or is it one?
More than 1.
Anytime it's more than one, we call it a system.
Yeah, what's
You can even have times when there's 3. Still a system. Sometimes there's 4 equations. Still a system. Anytime it's more than one equation, it's a system of equations. But notice in this one, I don't have y equals a number, but I do have y equals 2x plus 4. So what could that 2x plus 4 take the place of?
your x and y?
The x and the y? What is it equal to?
Y.
When it was y equals 2, what could take the place of y?
2.
So when it's y equals 2x plus 4, what can take the place of y?
2x plus 4.
I'm substituting that in for y. That's what we really call that. Anyone would want to take a shot in the dark what that method would be called, where we substitute something in?
Substituting?
Close.
Substitution?
Substitution.
Wow, that was a brain tickler.
But like, this is what I want you to understand about math, is it's not supposed to make it really hard. Slope, intercept, form. What 2 things do you need to write that equation of a line?
Slope and definitely not intercept.
I know, right? Slope and definitely not a y-intercept. Oh wait, that is what we need. What about for point slope? What do you
Oh
need?
my god, I guess I was dumb.
Point and a slope, right? Mathematicians are not original. They're not trying to make it hard. They're trying to help you know what you're supposed to have, right? So when I look at this, right? When I look at this, I'm substituting in for y, and so now I have a single equation. And I'm going to simplify 3x, then I'm going to use my inverses, subtract 4, divide by 3, and it comes out to be that x is equal to negative 3. We good with that? Now, I haven't found the y value yet, but if x is equal to negative 3, what can that negative 3 take the place of? X. This was the y equals 2x plus 4, but I plugged negative 3 in for x. They gave me negative 6 plus 4. Y is negative 2. If you were to plug that negative 3 into the other equation, what do you think you would get for the y value?
Plus 2, or plus negative 2.
Or just negative 2, right? Remember, the solution to a system is the one point that makes both equations true. So should it be a different y value?
Yeah, what?
So if it's the one point that makes both equations true, should the y value be different?
No.
No. Negative 3, negative 2. Negative 3, negative 2. You'll have more practice with that moving forward, and we need to pay attention to that. Are there any questions about that before we move forward? Today. That makes sense at least, even if we didn't get a chance to try it. And I will point this out, I know some of us already had stuff written down, but I really liked one of the things that Peyton did at the beginning when he saw this is, you took some notes on the things you didn't have, right?
I just tried to solve it.
Okay. Did you check your answers and make sure?
Yeah, I got one wrong.
Okay. But in general, if I have stuff written up here, could it be important stuff that you need to pay attention to? Right? So if I have stuff up on the board, if I take the time to go over something, you should probably take some notes on it. And that, not now at the end when I'm done going over it, but when I was first going over it, it would have made sense to take some notes on it, right? These are important note-taking skills that we need to pay attention to so that we are better prepared for future classes, but also specifically better prepared for college. No college professor is going to sit there and remind you, hey, take some notes on what I'm going over. You attend class, you take down notes so that you can be prepared. Okay? So we need that practice in there. So we're going to look at today's objectives. We're going to wrap up 5.3, some of one, none of the other. So let's get started with it. Corel, can you read our first objective?
I can represent the boundary line of the constraint equation in both standard and slope intercept form.
So we've seen boundary lines, we've seen constraint equations. There was one new thing that we learned on Friday. Which form of the equation of a line?
Standard.
Standard form, right? We've seen slope-intercept before. What is, when we say slope-intercept, what is that form of the equation of a line?
It's y equals mx plus b.
Is that what you're going to say, Desiree? Yeah. Y equals mx plus b. That's our slope-intercept form. But we introduced this idea of standard form because sometimes it's not super easy to see the slope in the y-intercept, but sometimes it's really easy to see the coefficients of x and y. And so what is the standard form of an equation?
AX plus BY equals C.
Right? Ax plus by equals c. Now there's a couple of small things we want to attend to. If you look over here, it says where b and c are this z letter. What do I mean by that z letter? Integers. We got to remember z are the integers. What number sets are we talking, or what type of numbers are we talking about when we say integers? Holy bay. If we don't know what the integers are, it's going to be hard to write this equation.
I was about to say real numbers, but I don't know that's right.
Integers are a type of real number. It's a part of the real numbers.
Anything in between, any number.
That's a real number.
Or
Is it 1 or
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It keeps going. Now, I will say 0 can be included, but that's not the integers. That's part of the integers. But we're missing half of the integers right now.
All numbers?
Not all numbers, say again.
negative?
And negative numbers, but not just negatives, specifically negative whole numbers. Now, when you say all numbers, you're talking about stuff like 2.5.
Yeah.
Is that an integer? No. Anytime it's a decimal or a fraction included, it's a part of a whole number, it is not an integer. But the integer is all those numbers. But notice I make the note that A is a W. What do I mean by W? Whole number. What is special about the whole numbers? That's true for an integer as well, though. So what's the difference between an integer and a whole number?
I was just fixing to ask you that.
Here's my whole numbers.
whole numbers are only
Say it.
whole numbers are only positive.
Whole numbers are only positive
Oh.
and include 0. But we want to notice that the integers, so A, B, and C are all integers, but specifically A is only a whole number, which means A has to be
Positive.
positive. Do B and C have to be positive?
No.
No, that's the big difference. A has to be a positive whole number, but B and C can be integers. Okay, so we're going to talk more about that later, but notice we're trying to represent the boundary line. Was that Corel who just read that?
Yes.
Desiree, hit us up with the second objective.
How do you convert back and forth between the slope and intercept form and the standard form of a line?
So if we're converting back and forth between those two different forms of a line, remember, those are both equations, right? So what do those equations have to be to each other? If if we can convert back and forth between them. They have to be equivalent, right? They're representing the same thing, so they are equivalent equations. And what are we going to use to convert back and forth between equivalent equations?
Standard form.
Well, that's the equation that we're trying to get to. But what allows you to use an inverse but still make that equation equivalent?
Property of quality.
There we go. We got to remember that if we're trying to create those equivalent equations or equivalent inequalities, we need those properties of equality and properties of inequality. All right, so we're going to think about that here. And then the new thing that we're going to get to finally today, Layla, can you read our last objective?
I can use a standard form of the line to identify the x and y intercept.
So why is the standard form of the line really useful? Now, this isn't the only reason, but what's the reason that standard form is really useful?
All you have to do is find points.
Okay, well, you do only need 2 points, but what 2 points are we going to be looking for?
X-intercept and Y.
X-intercept and Y-intercept. If we have that standard form of a line, it's really easy to find our X and Y-intercepts.
And it makes boundary lines, or property lines.
Say that one more time.
It's easy to make property lines with or boundary lines.
Very easy to write. Well, so yeah. Well, it depends on the situation, right? If I'm given a y-intercept and a slope, or a point and a slope, then I'm going to want to use one of those two equations, right? But in this case, right, so I asked y'all to do number 32 over the weekend, right? It says use both Carlos's and Clarita's methods to write the equation of the boundary line. Now, what equation did Carlos use? What form of the equation of a line?
Standard.
Carlos used standard?
Oh, yeah. Slope.
Slope.
Intercept.
Right, so Carlos was using y equals mx plus b. In this problem, does it give me my slope? Does it give me my y-intercept? If I'm using x as cats and y as dogs? I mean, I would point out,
Yeah.
neither of these numbers are cats and dogs. Aren't all three of these numbers all about money? So have they told us an exchange rate between cats and dogs yet? Have they told us how many cats or how many dogs I'm starting with?
No.
So I don't have a slope and a y-intercept. That's why slope-intercept would not be the easiest here. What's another representation that you might be able to create, though, that would help you get slope-intercept equation?
Table or graph.
Tables, graphs, pictures, all those kinds of things we want to keep in mind that we could use. And we'll look at those in a second. Thank you, sir. So yeah, we can make tables, we can make graphs, and that's actually what we did, right, when we first did 5.2. But what was Clarita's equation? What form did she use? Say again? Standard, which is?
AX plus B equals C.
Now, one of the things I want to remind you about with this standard form is, this isn't something that any of you even needed to know the name of to be able to write. A lot of us were already writing this form because what is multiplication? So when I see a times x, I'm repeatedly adding something x number of times, right? Same thing with b times y. So when I look at this problem here, what could I do for ax knowing that x is our cat pens and y is our dog runs? Remember, x is cats. What am I repeatedly adding for the cats? 32? So for the cats, I'm repeatedly adding $32 for each cat run, or cat pen. But for the dogs, I'm repeatedly adding $80. By the way, Devin, if you want to jump back there in group 4, so that you have a group to work with today, that'd be a good one. Equals,
Is it 1,208?
remember, this is all the startup costs for the cats, all the startup costs for the dogs, and then that could be how much money? Now, one thing I want to point out about this is, do they have to use all $1,280?
No.
They could use less than it, right? So why are we writing an equation here instead of the inequality less than or equal to? That's the line. Which line? Boundary line, or as Peyton likes to say, the property line, right? Notice If we've got an equation of a line, that is, or if we have a line, we're going to use an equation, okay? But then here was Carlos's, so make sure you have Clarita's equation down and Carlos's equation down. Be helpful if I didn't lose my clicker, which is right there. So there's Clarita, there's Carlos. We'd already looked at this startup cost and the slope intercept, which so I just made a quick little table to remind you. If there were 0 cats, we could have 16 dogs. If we went to 5 cats, we could have 14 dogs. So we're taking away 2 dog runs and we're adding 5 cat pens, which is how, in the past, we got our y-intercept of 16 dogs, slope of -2/5, or taking away 2 dogs for every 5 cats. So this is what we should have under number 2. All right, so this is the back of the first page.
Okay. What's 16 represent again? What 16 represents again?
What does this be? B is dogs?
No.
What form of the line did Carlos use? It's right next to my head. He used slope intercept. Y equals mx plus b. What does this m stand for? Well, rise divided by run, which is slope. That's what I'm looking for, right? That's my slope. And the way we calculate it is rise divided by run. If that's my slope, then what does this b have to be? Which intercept? The y-intercept. The output when the input is 0. So remember, we talked about the fact that we started out with 16 dogs there, right? And so that was for our startup cost. But as soon as I saw 0, 16, I knew that was my y-intercept. Okay? Now, within your groups, I'm gonna have you be working on numbers 3 and 4. But let's make sure we understand what we're trying to do in number 3. Show the steps you could use to turn Clarita's startup cost equation into Carlos's equation, and then explain why you can do each step. So, in order to know what to do, you got to kind of know where to start and where to end. Yes, sir?
Who's that lady that walks in and out of here?
We'll talk about that later. Where are we starting for this equation?
32x plus 80y
What told you to start with 32x plus 80y equals 1,280?
because that's
Clarita?
Yeah, that's for starting.
Right? You could use to turn Clarita's startup cost equation. That's the Clarita's equation. Well, what are we trying to get it to? Carlos's. So what form of the equation of a line did Carlos use? Slope intercept, or y equals, right, so we're trying to get to slope intercept. So what I want you to do when I release y'all at number 3, I want you to figure out, talk about how could I go from Clarita's standard form to Carlos's slope intercept. We clear that direction.
Well, I thought we already did that.
We did it for space, not for startup cost, Peyton. So number 1 was all about the space, we're now looking at startup cost. So for number 4, similar thing, but who are we starting with in number 4? Carlos, what was his equation? Okay, so y equals -2/5 x plus 16, or 2 divided by 5. That's Carlos. But we're trying to get his equation to Clarita's, what form did she have? She had standard, how do we write standard?
X plus by equals c.
There you go. So go ahead and talk within your groups, discuss with each other, how do you think we're going to convert each of those things. Now don't forget, these equations are equivalent. So that should give you some insight on how to do it. Once you finish up 3 and 4, you may move on to 5 and 6, but I will be coming between the groups to see how you're progressing. So go ahead and get to work.